Hello, HC Nation. Welcome, fellow time travelers. You're listening to the Adventure Box Podcast, the podcast that dives deep into the heartbeats of ancient civilizations like China. That's what we're talking about the last month or so. I'm your guide, Zach Edwards, and today we travel to one of the most influential empires in world history, the Han Dynasty in ancient China. So we always talk about a few things in each episode. So in this one, no difference. First, what everyday life looked like for peasants, artisans, merchants, and scholars. Second, we'll talk about how the Han people prayed and honored their dead and interpreted the heavens. And third, the inventions, scientific breakthroughs, things like that, that shaped not just China, but the entire world. And finally, we'll close with a story of bravery and honor by a woman named Hua Mulan, whose legacy carries the spirit of ancient China across centuries. So grab your scrolls, light some incense, and let's journey back over 2,000 years. So, first, let's talk about the social structure and daily lives of the people of the Han Dynasty. Let's begin in the villages and then the cities of the Han Dynasty. Now remember, Han Dynasty between 206 BC and 220 AD, 400 years. A time of order, innovation, and strong social values. China was ruled by an emperor, but most people lived far from the palace, on farms. Most people were in marketplaces and along hills and rivers, not in the middle of the capital of China. There were four major social classes in the beginning, and this shaped daily life. First, the lowest of the low, but were not totally low, were the peasants. These were the backbone of the Han society. Though poor, they were respected because they produced all the food for the empire. That's why people actually respected them at the time. They had land, they owned the farms, and they produced the food that the nobles and the merchants and the artisans, everyone needed. They farmed wheat, millets, and rice, all grains. And they used some advanced tools that they made up themselves, like the iron plow. Now, the second one, the second to the lowest of society, would be artisans and craftsmen. Now, they weren't low. They were deeply respected, especially those that commissioned their work, which means they paid them to do certain things. So that's why people respected the artisans and the craftsmen. Now, these people, they included the weavers, the bronze workers, the potters, and the carpenters. They created stunning lacquerware. You know, the plates and the bowls that all have a glass on it. Not glass. Glass. Glass looks like glass. It's a coating over the surface to make it shine. They also made paper, and they wrote on paper, and also silk, and the biggest one, ceremonial bronze vessels. That's right. In most religious celebrations or rituals, they use bronze vessels, containers, to celebrate their religion. Now, the artisans and craftsmen, they weren't in the farms, they were in the towns, the villages. They lived there, often near the nobles who commissioned their work. Now, next in line, they were the merchants. They were very smart people. They traded silk, spices, salt, and metals. They could be rich, but not necessarily. They were viewed very suspicious by the Confucius elites. Why? Yes, that's right. That's a good question. Because they didn't create anything. They moved goods and profits. So Confucianism, they wanted you to create something based off who you were and to share it with the world. Well, the merchants bypassed them and took one good from one person and sold it to another. Not bad. Good. Many merchants still found wealth and societal influence, especially in trade along the Silk Road. The Silk Road was growing in the beginning of the Han Dynasty. People were getting richer because they were bringing products from other countries. Merchandise. That's why they're called merchants. Or maybe it's merchants, which makes the word merchandise. Either way. Okay, the next class, the highest class under the nobles. They were the scholars and the government officials. Highest class outside of the nobility. If you weren't family to the emperor, you wanted to be pretty high up, you'd be a scholar or government official. But not everyone could be a government official. You had to be selected through rigorous civil service exams. That's right, written exams. Of course, you had to read, write, and learn arithmetic. That's what you need to do, right? Okay, they memorized Confucian text and studied ethics and history and law in order to become bureaucrats or government officials. These scholars were meant to rule with ritual and act as moral examples. Though they just became greedy and, you know what, I'm going to talk about that later on. I'll talk about it later on. I will not do it right now. So let's talk about family life. Family life in China was the most sacred institution in Han society. The father was head of the household. They believed in the filial piety. This is the respect for parents and ancestors, which considered it was considered the foundation of the morals of Chinese life. Now, the father was the head. The wife was center in the household. That's where they lived. Their whole lives were centered around the household. Childbearing, and also obedience to the husband or father. Now, this is interesting because we don't do that now. Well, we do. We have still a patriarchal society, but there's a lot of people that want to fight back. They're called feminists. And yes, they do have their place that women need to have more of a voice, but at the same time, you don't understand China if you think that they were subservient. I said the word right. Subservient to the husband, which means they served under the husband. It wasn't like that. A woman's life was, a family was about order. When you have a business, how many leaders do you have? Well, the more leaders you have, the more answers you're going to get to certain questions, and there's going to become a lot of confusion. Like Confucius. Sometimes it's confusing. But because there's only one person at top, it means that there's always just one rule. And it might be mom that makes the decision, but then the kids can all understand mom's in control. That usually happened when the husband went off to war or went off to business. The woman controlled the household. Make no mistake, women yielded a lot of soft power. They ran the businesses at home, they managed the estates, and they became respected poets and strategists. And one would one day lead an army. Well, actually, there was multiple, but one we're going to talk about at the end. You know her name, Mulan. Yes, that's right. Okay, now, religious. This is a big part of the Chinese culture. Religion and spiritual practices. Now, let's move from the household altar to the temple courtyard. That's right, so the household has an altar. They have this place where they have a statue, normally of a ancestor, or a seal of an ancestor, which they pray to for help and protection. Well, let's go into it. Let's talk about ancestor worship. Okay, at the heart of religious life in China, families kept ancestral tablets in their homes. Often, they offered incense, food, and wine to the spirits of the elders. It wasn't about the elders controlling them. It was actually them asking the elders for connection. Or, in other words, they wanted protection and even guidance. It wasn't about fear. It was about respect for the elders. Again, what was it called? Do you remember what it was called? It was called piety. Filial piety. And that was so important because it was all about order, which is what China is all about. Like a lot of Chinese culture, order. Now, let's talk about the highest order. That was the heaven, the Tian. Now, it was not about paradise. Heaven was not considered paradise. It was considered a cosmic force of justice. If an emperor ruled poorly, heaven would withdraw the mandate. You remember, we talked about it before. The mandate from heaven. That's how an emperor gets his place. But if he's not, and I just realized I just had my picture here, I have it doubled. Let me close this one. Okay, there we go. Sorry. Then let's bring up a picture of China. I love this picture. It is so close to home for me. Okay. Come on. There's China. Okay. This is where we're talking about China. And there's Taiwan. You know all the issues that are happening right now. China wants to take over Taiwan. Taiwan does not want to become subservient to China. Just like Hong Kong did. Hong Kong gave up their sovereignty. I mean, what, you have like the Koreas. They were part of China at one point. Then they became Korea. Then they became North and South. China, not much like South. China, good friends with North. And Japan, not very friendly with China either. All these countries, all these struggles. In Confucianism, we don't like that. Taoism, we like balance. We like peace. Actually, in Taoism, we like to go with the flow. You know what I mean? Hit the wave. Those type of things. Like surfer type of dudes. Okay. In Confucianism, we were about order. And this is why we talk about order in the household. It was based off of the idea of like things like Confucianism. Okay. Let's talk about, we're talking about heaven. Okay. So again, if the emperor was poor, the heavens withdrew their mandates, resulting in multiple things like droughts and rebellions and even defeat. You're going to see that in just a few years. For about 400 years from the beginning of the Han Dynasty. Again, it's known as the mandate of heaven, the cornerstone of Chinese political beliefs. Now, and there's also Taoism. Taoism, it taught harmony. It believed in the Tao, which is the natural way of the universe. Taoists, their rituals focused on balance and healing and communication with spirits through music, meditation, and movement. You know those people in like Central Park where they balance on one foot and they move. The Chinese Taoism. That's right. They believed in music, meditation, and movement. Now, they believed that mountains and rivers, lots of movement, lots of music, and forests were often believed to hold like sacred powers. That's why they're so important. Now, that's then when Confucianism arrived. You know not Confucianism. That's when Buddhism arrived. It entered China in the late Han Dynasty, around 0 to 100, maybe a little bit more past 100 AD. It came from India and came over the Silk Road. Now, like we said, trade was over the Silk Road, but not just trade of goods. It was trade of merchandise. Oh, no, wait. That was the originally. But it was actually over understanding. That's right. If you had a philosophy, you took it on the Silk Road to teach others. Like missionary work. Whoa, that's interesting. Missionary work's been around a long, long time. Now, Buddhism introduced the idea of karma, which means what goes around comes around. If you're a bad person, bad things will come back to you. Or reincarnation. When I die, I will be reborn as a cricket. Hopefully not. Hopefully I'll be a big, powerful emperor next time. And the pursuit of enlightenment, which means I want to know from the beyond. I want to know information from the beyond. Eventually, it blended with the native Chinese beliefs, and it created a rich spiritual landscape, such as like Buddhism and Confucianism and Taoism and even legalism. They all seem to merge in different ways, though they're all diverse and they all stick to themselves. There's like a melding of ideas inside of China. So religion in the Han wasn't about one truth. It was about a balance, tradition, and also harmony with the universe. Okay, here we go. Let's talk about the science and technology of the Han Dynasty. Very important. Very, very important. Okay, I'm going to give you three, let's see. What is it? One truth and a lie? One truth and two lies? Let's just do two truths, one lie. You try to figure it out. Okay. China came up with something that detected earthquakes. That's one. China created... Oh, we already talked about that. No, I don't want to do that one. Which one do I want to do? I want to do... Came up with astronomy and mathematics. And also, let's see, the magnetic compass. That's right. Came up with the magnetic compass. Now think about it. Which one is a lie? Which one's a lie? Think about it. Which one? Okay. The answer is none of them. None are false. They did all of those. Starting off with the seismograph. That was invented by Zhang Heng. Now, this device detected earthquakes long before they were felt. It used a bronze vessel, like a big pot, and a pendulum. It goes tick, tock, that dropped into a ball from a dragon's mouth. And when tremors occurred, it would move the pendulum until it bang, bang, hit the bronze vessel. And that would tell people, earthquake coming. Okay, the second thing they did, another one, the iron plow. Very, very important. Very important for farmers. All of our wheat and our rice, well, maybe not the rice. The rice was planted in water, but the wheat was planted in fields, needed to be plowed. Basically, a plow cuts through dirt, pushes aside, allows for seeds to go in the dirt, and then covered back up. It was a very strong, well, we used to use wood, but now we use iron, which is a game changer. So it was stronger, sharper to get through the dirt. It was sharper than wood, and the iron plows helped farmers dig deeper and plant more effectively, boosting more food production for the entire empire, everyone. Okay, next, the magnetic compass. Yes, that's right. This was actually used for early spiritual orientation. It would send you due south, not due north like you, due south. And it had a spoon-shaped arm piece, which had magnetic, and it would go towards the south. Later, it would guide Chinese sailors across the ocean, which was great because going across the ocean, you're in the middle of the water, and the stars are covered up by clouds. How do you tell where you go? You don't. You go around and round and round and round in circles. Except, if you have a compass, you know exactly what is south. Okay, next, and this is very well known, Chinese medicine was above and beyond most things that we even have today, minus modern medicine. Surgeries, yes, very important. But when it came to balance in the body, the yin and the yang, like Taoism, the balance of your body, this was Chinese medicine. They use herbs, acupuncture, breathing techniques. Breathe in, breathe out. Yes, all those restored health. Physicians even studied pulse diagnosis, listening to your pulse, and classified diseases in medical texts that are still used today. Last, mathematics. Mathematics, very important. They did so much in the Han Dynasty for mathematics, including creating formulas for area, volume, and even fractions. And then astronomy. Oh, yes. Then there's astronomy. Tracking comets, lunar eclipses. I mean, when ancient people saw lunar eclipses, they thought, it's heaven coming down and saying, bad, you being bad. And then you say, I'm sorry. And then all of a sudden the shadow would go off the sun. You're like, I've been forgiven. Well, it was actually lunar eclipses, and Chinese understood this now, so they were able to map when they were supposed to come, including the solar calendar. It was critical for agriculture and also imperial rituals. They weren't just technical feats. They were interwoven into the philosophies on daily life of the Han people. The Han legacy is of science. This is why it was the pinnacle of pinnacles in China, and is even felt today. From plows to pulses, from compasses to calendars, all of it was collected in this. Now, this is why there is such a great legacy of the Han Dynasty. Now, as I promised, we're going to go a little out of the Han Dynasty, and we will talk about the legacy on Wednesday. Today's Monday. So on Wednesday, we will do that. But now, I want to tell you a story. Let me tell you a story that passed down from mother to daughter and father to son for generations. This is the story of Hua Mulan. The tale takes place during the Northern Wei Dynasty, which is about 386 AD to about 534 AD, well after the Han. It embodies the values of filial piety, which means respecting your elders, your parents, and your ancestors, also bravery and honor that trace back into early dynasties. Now, the legacy, the story originally was a ballad, which is like a set of poems and something you would tell to people instead of reading. It was more of telling it, but it was written during the 5th and 6th century. Now, this tells of how a young woman takes her elderly father's place in the army, disguising herself as a man. Now, interesting enough, Disney likes to say she showed that she was a woman when she went in to see the emperor and saved the empire as a woman. But actually, that's false. That's Disney changing history or changing stories. Just like this changed Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, Snow White, all German stories that they made for their own. In this one, let's see, I will tell you what part of the ballad. It said, "Last night I saw the army list. My father's name was called." That's how it started. It was like a poem. She trained, fights, and even serves with distinction for 12 years. When offered a high position for the emperor, she declines. Now, everyone thought she was a he. All she wanted to do was go home. Now, remember, if a man leaves the household, the woman takes over, the mother takes over. He would have been gone for 12 years, her elderly father. And instead of her father leaving, she left and served the Chinese government, the Chinese army. 12 years she was gone. So when it came to her decision, she wanted to go home. But here's the thing. When her comrades visited her later to see her, they found out she was in women's clothing. They were stunned. They had never guessed. That's right. They never guessed. Could you do that? I don't know if I could. Okay, so some of the great things about Mulan's story, it was more than legend. It was symbolic of women's strength, female strength in the patriarchal world. Now, patriarchal means man not ruled, man run, man order, man on top. Now, as you know, like we talk about, there was a balance in the household, in most households. Men were no dictators. They were not to be dictators, as was the rule of the Confucianism belief. They were to be the head, like the CEO, which would help give order to everyone else. But when CEO gone, mother in charge of everything. So they had lots of soft power. Though the other one, two more. It also taught of loyalty to family above all. Nothing else above family. Well, yeah, I guess above all. And of the ability to define one's own identity in a rigid society. She believed that she was strong and she could be a warrior. Society said, no, you could not be a warrior, you're a woman. But she knew she could. Though the Northern Wei were not Han by ethnicity, meaning they were not the same people, they embraced the Han values of Confucianism and Chinese literary tradition, making Mulan's story a powerful bridge between dynasties. Her name lives on, reminds us of honor, duty, and courage, transcending time. Okay, so there we go. That's it for today, except I want to go over a few things we talked about. So what do we take away from the Han Dynasty? It was more than just emperors and conquests. It was civilizations. It was a civilization of scholars and farmers, mothers and warriors, poets and inventors. The Han gave us rituals, reason, and resilience. That's right. And even in the fall, even when it fell, which we'll talk about on Wednesday, it seeded ideas that would shape Asia and the world for centuries. And those stories like Ha Mulan, we remember that history is not only built by rulers, but by those brave enough to stand for their own place, in their own place. So like you can be brave to do what's right and to stand up for everyone that needs help. I won't say that's lower than you, because even those on top could use your help. So thank you for joining me on today's journey through the Adventure Box podcast. I am Zach Edwards, your humble narrator, and bronze scroll unroller, and also the admirer of ancient wisdom. If you love this episode, leave us a 5-star review, share it with your friends, and write your own ballad in honor of a forgotten hero. Next time, we will talk about the fall of the Han Dynasty and the end of the Classic Era. Thank you so much. We shall talk to you Wednesday. Okay, bye-bye. If you have any comments or questions, add them to the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow, actually. Take care. Bye.